Welcome to the Silver Creek Insights podcast. I'm your host, Felisa Wiley. Today, we are exploring the intersection of artificial intelligence, ethics, and healthcare strategy with someone whose work is reshaping how we think about patient-centered innovation. Brian brings decades of experience across public health, AI governance, strategic leadership, advising startups, healthcare institutions, and cross-sector coalitions alike. As the Chief AI Ethics Officer at Envision AI and founding CEO of Envision Health AI, he's helping organizations build more responsible, equitable, and effective technologies for care. Brian, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Hi. I'm glad to be here and glad to be seeing your audience. So my name is Brian Green, and I have about 30 years of experience in healthcare, starting as a researcher, social science researcher in public health. And then I merged into doing, what we call quality improvement work within healthcare and healthcare teams, more of an administrative role in some ways. And then the last, 7 years, I was in the nonprofit sector. I did more health communications, took on our website development, developing an app, social media presence, those sorts of things, communication strategy, and advocacy, public advocacy, which when I jumped to the private sector, which I'd been for the last decade, in the private sector, I did more digital health, health technology, digital health, and the kind of pharma advertising and market research space, which is how I got into AI, frankly. So, in my old company, we did a lot of predictive AI. We did RPA or automations of data workflows for analytics purposes. And kind of doing that automation and that predictive AI work got me interested in generative AI, which was just kind of beginning to be, on the market, which is where I'm at now.
That is a lot. Amazing. I love that you have such a vast background working nonprofit, for profit, but it all is along like the same line of healthcare, and then it gets you into like AI. So I love seeing like that path for you. And currently you're the Chief AI Ethics Officer. What does ethical AI actually look like in a healthcare setting?
Well, that's a really good question because it doesn't look the same everywhere. That's one of the current challenges, is that trying to put a framework around responsible AI, ethical AI, and having robust governance frameworks is just kind of emerging as a practice. And how one healthcare institution chooses to do it may not match what another healthcare institution does. Or in one country, it may look a little bit different than somewhere else, frankly, unfortunately. Some of us that work in the AI ethical space within healthcare are trying to bring those frameworks together as much as possible. And there's some organizations like in the US called the Coalition for Health AI, for example, that are trying to promulgate specific frameworks that help bring about some level of standardization. But one of the challenges for ethical AI is it's not static. So you can develop guidelines, but as the technology evolves and the needs of patients change and healthcare systems themselves evolve, these standards need to evolve and keep up, right? So we've had certain patient protections in the US. We have HIPAA, for example. We have privacy protections. In the EU, there's GDPR. There's other protections for patient populations, and now the EU AI Act. And all of these taken together can help us develop a more robust governance framework. But as I said, it's not one size fits all. It's constant work. And it frankly takes people within any given healthcare organization setting up their own internal team that's a multi-stakeholder group that's focused on AI governance. So it's, you can call it an ethical committee. It can function very similar to an IRB or institutional review board, which is used for clinical research currently. But it's a group of people that are committed to guiding the ethical focus and governance protections of AI integrations and use within an institution, and ensuring that patients are protected within however AI is integrated within workflows.
So you covered a lot there, but I want to take a step back because you mentioned that you have to keep up with the new technology and create new standards. So
Yes.
let's say a new standard is in place and you're currently working on building a model around that. And then 3 months, like let's say it's like a 6 month project, and then 2 months in, there's like this whole new like technology that now exists. How do you incorporate that new technology into whatever you're building? How does that process look like? Because in the AI space, literally every single day, there's a new technology, there's a new buzzword, there's something new that half of it is just buzzy. It's not necessarily like
Yes.
new and like it's like a shiny new toy, but it's just like the same thing, like with a new wrapper on it and like talk about it in a different way. How do you take like the real tech, the one that can actually impact the work that you're doing, and incorporate that while you've already started a project incorporating the old new tech?
Well, what I do for my own work, as well as what I would advocate for clients to do in my consulting capacity, is literally start with governance first framework.
Mm-hmm.
So before you start developing an AI tool, or before you start having your workforce use AI or integrate a specific AI tool with, sorry. uh, sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Before you start having your workforce integrate a specific AI tool, you need to consider, you know, that you have an AI governance framework. So a committee that's set up, um, policies, and a set of internal guardrails. So there's a lot you need to set up front. If you
Mm-hmm.
have these processes in place, they're continuous. It's not you do it once, and then you don't have to worry about it again, right? It's not like, oh, we have governance, let's move
Yeah.
on. It's a process that's continuous from end to end, the entire life cycle of AI development or AI integration. So what that means is you don't ever adopt a new technology without the same rigorous type of
Mm.
testing, or set of guardrails or audit trails or review that you would do, for an existing technology. Um, so yes, there may be a model that's changing 6 months from now, but you're already utilizing certain models that are there. So you wouldn't adopt a new model until you've done that level of testing or ensuring that it actually works within your workflow. Now,
Very fair.
an example of this that's happening right now is there's a focus on what we call agentic AI, right? And agentic AI is literally autonomous AI agents that work together in an orchestrated way to produce a specific outcome or to work on, separate tasks that all tie together for a specific outcome. So in that context, for example, you would not ever pull in or utilize a new agent within that workflow without doing the same level of testing that you use for the existing agents that you have. So
Okay.
that's just one example. There's others.
No, that absolutely makes perfect sense. So thank you so much for explaining that. Because if I'm trying to think back to, there's like a like paperwork involved when an old company that I worked with was trying to like work with a new client or bring in a new tool. Like it's some sort of like discovery thing, like an SOW. I don't even know what it was called. But it's bringing back memories now where it's like you don't just adopt something immediately. It goes through the
Right.
same processes that it goes
Yep.
with in every single thing. Like even if you want your company to now use like a DocuSign or something, it goes with
Yeah.
that same thing. You don't just
Yeah.
like incorporate it. You have to like one make sure that it works with the current systems, understand like what's needed, the people involved,
Yes.
privacy. So that makes perfect sense. So, but I'm curious, what is one ethical dilemma that you've had to navigate when developing or advising AI on AI models in
Oh
healthcare?
gosh. This is a tough one because I feel like there's never a single ethical dilemma. There's lots of ethical dilemmas, right? And this is the biggest challenge of integrating AI well and responsibly into healthcare. There's always some ethical dilemmas and challenges. The the biggest one is one I'll speak to kind of generically that I call the transparency containment paradox, right? And this one it's a term I made up. I trademarked it, I guess. But
Okay.
this means that there's, the need for transparency of your AI systems within healthcare, but you also need to contain them, particularly because of cybersecurity and other reasons, right? You don't want people's private health data leaking out. You don't want to expose privacy protected, HEPA protected information. You don't want to expose trade secrets. You don't want to expose intellectual property rights. So there's a need for containment at the same time that you need to be very transparent so that people trust the system, right? So that's the paradox, is there's this constant balance that's needed. And the AI governance that we need to have in place is the way of ensuring that balance in an ongoing way throughout the AI development life cycle. So specifically to answer your question around an ethical trade-off, or ethical question that I would see is, I was working with a very early stage development company. They're developing an AI tool within healthcare. I won't name them, of course, but they were developing their MVP. They hadn't quite got the MVP, but they'd been demoing it a couple times, and I was part of the conversation. And after they finished stepping through the process and showing what they'd achieved so far, I asked the question because there was enough that they were demonstrating that just made me think. Exactly how many patients did you talk to as you were developing this tool?
It was 0.
And their answer was zero. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, what? And and they're like, well, we talked to doctors, and it's a tool that's intended to be used just by healthcare professionals. Patients won't see it. And I'm like, I don't care. That doesn't matter. You have to involve patients in the understanding of their needs, and to develop a tool that's actually responsive, regardless of if just the healthcare providers are using it. Number one, that's going to develop, you're going to have the best tool that way. Secondly, even if you don't think that that's true, you need to be able, if this is ever going to be used in a healthcare setting, patients have to be consented to the use of this tool.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Um, and if you've never talked to patients before you've developed it and rolled it out, there might be something you've missed that would actually make it, less likely that patients will want to consent to this, right? So
Yeah.
you need to be able to integrate the patient perspective early on in the development process, but also throughout, again, the entire life cycle of the AI development, deployment, and post-deployment process where you're
Mhm.
evaluating, right? So this is a challenge. And I've talked to other teams, even in large institutions where they had a governing body, like I spoke of, an AI governance body that was led by, mostly physicians, but had some other stakeholders. And I asked them, how do you incorporate patient? So sorry.
You're good. Take a breath. Take a breath.
Let me just. And I asked them, how do you incorporate the patient voice, um, or patients themselves or patient advocacy groups within your governing body? And they're like, well, that's a good question. We haven't done it yet. And again, I'm
Wow.
astounded. This is a large healthcare institution that said that we haven't done it yet. And then one of the doctors jumped in and said, well, we're unsure, if there's issues that we're talking about data, in the governance group, how do we trust the patients? And I'm like, and I wanted to say, well, how do they trust you?
Mhm.
Why is it
Like,
this
how do you trust the
one-sided
patient?
conversation? It,
This is
it
a product
shouldn't
for
be.
patients.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be a one-sided conversation. And if doctors can't trust patient advisors in an advisory group, there's something wrong there. And I
Yeah.
mean, again, I think to the follow-up, of course, was, well, think about an IRB and think about how that works, and think about the fact that, hopefully you guys have a patient advocacy arm or group involved
Mhm.
in your IRB. I know every IRB I was ever a part of had patient advocates at the table. So I'd be shocked or surprised. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised when it doesn't happen. Um, I don't understand that perspective, because there's always ways to, yes, there might be times where you need to discuss very specific data. But it's not like
Mhm.
any of those committees pull in an actual patient chart to discuss it. That's not the purpose of
Yeah.
a committee. It's not like a grand rounds discussion where you're looking at actual patients' charts. Um, and if you need to talk about an issue that is that specific, you do it in an anonymized fashion, right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways to work around this if they're actually committed to
Mhm.
inclusion of patients and it's not just lip service. And I'm always that's why I'm not really surprised when it happens because there's plenty of people out there in healthcare um, world that just give lip service to patient inclusion and patient voice.
Which blows my mind because healthcare, caring for the patients. It's a kind of in a way like a collaborative experience where the patient has to trust the doctor or the product. Then the healthcare providers in the background also have to trust it as well. But if you are in healthcare, you're in healthcare to work with patients. So any
Yeah,
product that is in the healthcare space should be built with the patient in mind. Um, and a part of
absolutely.
that is also that you mentioned that, like, oh well, how do I trust that the patient advisor or the patient is doing X, Y, and Z? How do you build trust with patients and providers when AI is part of the clinical decision making process?
Well, I mean that's a great kind of problem to have. I think. And I think the answer there is really not dissimilar for AI, in the context of AI, than it is for anything else in healthcare, right? Um, you build trust with patients and patient communities through your relationship, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you need to listen to them. You need to talk to them. Like so, the fundamentals of good healthcare and community based healthcare and patient centric healthcare are the same, irrespective of the technology that's being utilized. The reality is that plenty of healthcare systems and plenty of doctors themselves or healthcare providers themselves do not do a very good job at this, irrespective of the technology. If you listen
Mm-hmm.
to the problems or challenges that patients have, and this is my background, this is my experience, this is the type of research I've done historically. I've done focus groups, I've done interviews with patients, I've worked in co-creation, labs with patient groups. And if you listen to what patients say, one of their number one, challenges within healthcare systems is feeling like they're not being heard. So that's
Mm.
partly I'm not being listened to, but being heard is like a little bit different than are they listening to me, right? Because
Yeah.
it's about how is the approach there? What is the relationship like? Is it one built on this hierarchy of I'm the expert, you're the patient, just listen to what I
Mm-hmm.
say? Or is it one of a shared understanding and shared decision making, right? And in example in oncology, shared decision making is actually a thing that's that plenty of people have researched, including myself, researched, what does it mean to have true shared decision making between a healthcare provider and a patient. And in the context of oncology, this is really important because there's very many treatment options for certain types of cancer, right? And there's trade offs between some treatments that have more side effects, some have less, some have a bigger
Mm-hmm.
impact on your quality of life, some actually mean that you may have a recurrence of cancer versus other treatments. So there's a lot of things to consider. And the job of the healthcare provider, frankly, is to provide the context and the best information to the patient so that they can make an informed decision with their family about the best treatment option that they think works for them at that point in time,
Right.
given the balance of those considerations. So it's not a always one is the best choice. It might be here's the top three choices for you. Now let's talk about what this might mean for your life moving forward, right? And so it's a complex conversation. It's not a 15-minute discussion, which is what our healthcare systems are kind of organized around. So the research around shared decision making, true shared decision making in oncology, reveals some of the patterns and some of the things that we hope to see about how those conversations need to be open, respectful, um,
Mm-hmm.
where the physician needs to lead certain aspects of the conversation, but also be open and listen to hearing some specific concerns and prompting or probing for more
Yeah.
depth around explanation to bring up topics very early, like around palliative care, for instance. There's there are which palliative care is talking about pain and how to manage pain, for instance, within a context of cancer treatment. So there's lots of nuance there. Bring it back to AI, right? So AI is actually very good. Generative AI is actually very good at this type of pattern recognition to
Yeah.
look
Yeah.
at you know thousands, hundreds of thousands of transcripts or patient records or research like what I'm talking about and say, you know what? Here's the best way to provide context and information back to a patient that's asking a question and doing it in a way that, for AI sounds emotive,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it has emotional intelligence, right? Sounds like there's some compassion there,
Mm-hmm. That
that there's
compassion,
respect,
empathy.
right?
Yeah.
AI, it can't do these things really, but it can mimic them by looking at good and bad with people that have done reinforcement learning with the models like myself, prompting it with saying this is a good response, this is a bad response, whatever. Um, or rubric-based reinforcement learning, where you give it the criteria that allows it to learn on its own over time. Um, it turns out that Gen AI is actually better than a lot of doctors in providing compassionate, supportive responses.
Which
Now,
is
are they more
crazy to think
accurate?
about.
Maybe not, right?
Yeah.
So the research is out on accuracy, and that's the biggest challenge. Everyone's focusing on the accuracy. Well, that's really not as important when they're all at 95% accuracy right now. What's the difference between 95 and 99, right? Like,
Right.
do you really need that last 4%? If what is more important is the information provided in a way, is the questioning, the answers provided in a way that patients feel supported, heard, and that someone actually or something cares about them. I think AI does open up a range of possibilities that really will help or could help improve healthcare patient communication and interactions, which, leads to better patient experiences, which should be a goal of healthcare.
I completely agree. And as you were talking, it actually got me thinking about potentially like a new product that might be able to assist in how doctors like talk to and
Yeah,
respect patients. Because I mean, we've all experienced the times where we definitely don't feel heard. We feel
yes,
like, oh, they listened to me, but they didn't actually understand where I was coming from or listened. Because and if we like put our minds in like the lives of these doctors and general practitioners, they are also going through. They have so many patients, they're busy, they are working on 15-hour shifts, like, so I could understand from their perspective why they're just trying to like keep it going and like
yeah,
do the best that they can given all that they're dealing, because these are people too, we can't forget that.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
imagine this, imagine if during like residency or that time when they're like the medical students are going from department to department trying to figure out what they want to focus in, and they
Yes,
have kind of like a recorder that they just like take it and it follows them around. And so when they're in charge of patients or talking to patients, a transcript is then developed from that. And then the AI can be like, you know what, you weren't that compassionate around these hours. Maybe this is around the time you need to start eating your lunch, or like you showed more compassion to this one patient, and you show more compassion to patients who meet like X, Y, and Z. Imagine a world where doctors themselves can get a report. And I don't know if this exists. Does this
yeah.
exist? Do you work in healthcare? It does exist.
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it does. I think it's a great idea. Yes, I think that um, AI can be used for medical education,
Yeah.
specifically for residency. And I've talked about this a little bit in the context of, well, some from some talks I've given, but also in the context of my other company, where we're developing an app. Like we're literally developing an app for patients with rare disease. And one of the goals there is to also improve HCP and patient education, uh, uh, communication. Sorry. But this point about using AI tools on the educational front and for residencies in particular, I think is a way to open the door to doctors in general, healthcare providers that are gatekeepers at major, teaching hospitals, because they're frankly often very resistant to the use of AI tools for them, because I'm the expert. I've been a cardiologist as a surgeon for 20 years. Why would I want this? I don't need it. It's insulting, whatever. But they will agree that it's a good thing for the residents that they, don't have time for.
I
um,
know, yeah.
and, um, and that residents of course need help, so I think that it actually plays well into one of the biggest challenges within healthcare as the gatekeeper. And again, it's not to say that doctors are bad people. It's really
Hmm.
normal for any kind of new technology to be resistant, to question it, to be skeptical. I myself was extremely skeptical around generative AI when some of the first models came out, and people are incessant talking about it, and I'm like, would you people stop already? I'm so sick of this. But I just started researching it more and more, and I'm like, you know what, this can be really useful. Let's move beyond predictive AI and RPA and start thinking about how we actually use generative models within workflows. So I convinced myself, after kind of overcoming my initial skepticism, by just doing the research, which is kind of how I work. And I think doctors are the same way. Engineers are the same way. Doctors, engineers, it's like, yeah, you're initially skeptical because that's not what you studied. Um, and you want to see the data for yourself. That's normal, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I think, and we're in early days where, doctors want to protect patients. That's a good thing. So that impulse of like, I don't want to just pull something new that I don't trust into my hospital, into my practice. I get it. But I think this conversation around residency and the challenge, I mean, it's really, really hard to run a residency program and have a number of residents, and they do need attention, and we
Hmm.
don't have good ways of educating anyone, frankly, in today's world, including doctors. The medical education system itself needs significant revamping, and it's always about time, right? There's
Hmm.
very little, maybe one course on communications,
Which is
um,
crazy to me.
one
Communication is probably the
course
biggest part
on,
of their
yeah,
job.
exactly. So like there's not enough focus on the things that are the most critical and the most challenging in healthcare right now. And technologies like this is another one. So if you can learn how to utilize a technology experientially when you're learning everything else, that's the key. So I do agree with you 100%. I've talked about it and thought about that being a way, into healthcare institutions at the point that someone's developing Envision Health AI, my company that we're developing this tool for rare disease patients, at the point that we'll be having the conversation. You best believe that that'll be one of the talking points that I use.
Honestly, we should probably like try to host a talk for resident students. We should talk about that. I feel like that would be a nice like little panel.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I've talked to a lot of doctors. Um, Usually, most of them are past the point of residency, just because it's hard to, it's harder to figure out how to recruit residents into like some kind of conversation, because they're usually kind of more isolated
Hmm.
by design within an institution, except for just my own. I can like, oh well, my doctor appointment. It's funny because I've had like specialty appointments where I won't go into detail, but like three residents come into the room. The doctor, of course, asks first. Like, oh, can they come in and observe this procedure? And I'm like, oh sure, yeah, whatever, fine. So I've encountered many residents that way. I just handed my business card. Hey, let's have a conversation later.
Honestly, I feel like I have had the same thing where like I'm in a room and then all of a sudden like four people and they're like, oh, they're just watching. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah,
Keep
yeah. I'm
going.
like, oh my god, it's so funny.
Like thanks. Like I get it, but like come on,
Well,
people.
it doesn't bother me because I've been, as I said, I've worked in healthcare forever, and I've been on the
Yeah.
other end. I've been on the other end of the people wanting to ask the questions, and the like, oh, we need to do a focus group. We need to have some interviews. So I was in the hospital, gosh, a year, not last fall, 2 years ago, in the fall, for something. I was there for 5 days,
Oh my
and I've
goodness.
never been in the hospital before since I was born. Like I've never been an inpatient, so it's my first inpatient experience. of myself. I, of course, visited friends and family members, but for myself, it's my first inpatient experience. So I learned a lot um, within the observing things, particularly relative to AI, because the technology that we have now in hospitals is very different than it was even 5 years ago. Of what I think I
Yeah.
would observe and see in site visits. I haven't done site visits in healthcare institutions for about 15 years. I guess is when I did that in my prior job. So just being an observer and seeing interactions for a full week was a really kind of interesting and eye-opening experience in many ways. And it did. I've actually thought about a lot of things related to AI because of that. For instance, I've talked a lot about IoT
Yeah.
and the need to ensure that IoT devices are well integrated into your AI governance, right? And we don't really have good most institutions don't have a good data governance framework already and cybersecurity framework for
Hmm.
IoT. IoT is a big place of
Honestly,
vulnerability.
it should
Yes,
be like when I'm like talking to guests about this, the order of importance should be data quality and data governance. Let's see, then like cybersecurity and then AI. And like if you don't have like your cybersecurity or like
absolutely.
your
Yeah.
overall data quality in check, you shouldn't even be like looking up here because you're not ready for it.
Yeah, I mean if you don't have the foundational data
Hmm.
governance and data security that's needed from a cybersecurity perspective, you're just going to fail at AI. And you're introducing so many more um, vulnerabilities into your
Hmm.
system if you don't have that solid foundation. I've talked about this a lot because I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but because I'm working in AI and doing integrations and looking at people's tech stack and all of these things as part of a readiness assessment process or an integration assessment process, I've seen this. And so I started a year ago, I started going to like cybersecurity conferences and talking to people and reading more cybersecurity stuff. And since then, I've joined OWASP,
Okay.
um, and CSA. So, I guess like I'm a quasi cybersecurity expert. I don't consider myself a cybersecurity expert at all, right? But I've learned a lot about the integrations, and I've written about um, agentic AI and cybersecurity specific needs and integrations and what we can do about it. And I've also written about the need for, more specific AI ops and ML ops so that we do have a better way of, every institution, every organization that's rolling out AI, specifically agentic AI. Here are the things that you need to do to adjust your teams so that you have a better posture, right? So it doesn't all fall on DevOps. It doesn't all fall on Dev Security Ops team, right? They're part of the process, but your other ops teams need to be involved in this. It can't be siloed. Um, so
Can I?
it's
Can you send that to me so I could take a look at it?
yeah, I mean it's an emerging conversation. I think I've written trying to think what I've published. I've written a bunch that I haven't published yet.
Oh my goodness!
It's
Please
kind of,
send. Well, whatever you're done publishing it, please, or even
but
if you want like
but
thoughts
I
before
think
you
I've
publish it.
published. I might have published. I don't even remember now because it's like I forget. Like, have I published that or is it still one of the ones I'm
I
working on?
love
I don't even
this.
remember. Because but there's like three in a row that kind of talk about those types of concerns. And I'm speaking at a conference here in Philly area in King of Prussia. I'm speaking at a conference June 6th, I believe. It's a short talk. It's like what they call it, lightning talk. But I'm talking about a takeaway from one of those kind of issues, and right, it's focused more on like how do we make sure that we do this and still achieve an ROI. And so the title of that talk is From Prompts to Pipelines, right? And the
I
pipeline
love that
is the
so much.
operational focus, the ops that you can't ignore now that we have agentic AI workflows and these kind of cybersecurity and other
Hmm.
security, risk needs.
You've done a lot, and I'm gonna actually have to follow up with you on some of these because I
Sorry.
really do want to take a look. I also do this other thing where it's like a 10-minute podcast called Feast Fresh Take, and I would love for it to be like a review of one of your published articles or writings. I would have you
Okay,
on as
cool.
a guest to talk about that then.
Cool.
But um, From your works evaluating like LLMs, what is one thing that you think the public misunderstands about how these models work in real life healthcare tools?
Wow. Good question. Can you hold on just 1 second?
Yes, do what you got to do.
I'm going to grab my inhaler.
You're good.
Okay, that was my asthma inhaler, which I have to use because I'm very triggered right now. But
So sorry to
yeah,
hear that.
I mean, the more it's not just talking, but like when I laugh, it totally triggers right here.
I'm
Yeah,
going to be laughing right now hearing that you're
it's
triggered.
my fault because it's impossible for me to talk without laughing. Like
Right?
it's like always, that's how I am. So sorry. So
You're
the
good.
question about LLM evaluation, yeah. So I think there's a lot of what I would call misinformation out there right now because the focus of generative AI right now is on the chat GPTs or the conversational agents of the world, LLM based. And there's lots of other models behind AI that are not LLMs. And LLMs are part of the problem of the kind of things that people talk about the most that are, challenging about generative AI. So, for instance, the term I hate the most, hallucinations, I call them errors. In fact, I've talked about a spectrum of errors because there's not just one type. There's multiple types of AI errors, and they're significant. They can be significant, but there's the type of error matters. That's why I hate the term hallucination. It kind of lumps it all together into one thing and anthropomorphizes it. But regardless of that problem with just the language, um, I feel like it's misunderstanding what LLMs do, right? LLMs simply predict word context, like the next word in a sequence, and then contextualizes it, blah, blah, blah. So there's no way to prevent it from making what we as humans perceive as a hallucination or a specific type of error because it's just doing what it's supposed to do, right? You can't
Interesting take.
Yeah, so you really can't force that out of it. There are things you can do to correct for it, but what it means within healthcare is, and other, other applications as well, is that LLM based generative AI may not be what you need for the solution you're looking for. So you need to really start with the use case, like the specific use case you're trying to develop in healthcare. What are you trying to do? You may not need generative AI for that. Or more importantly, you probably need a hybrid model that is an agentic AI system that uses AI agents to perform very specific tasks, orchestrated. Some of those are LLM based agent calls, right? Not all of them. Some of them could be GAN models. Some of them, there's different types of models behind the tooling. But I think the focus right now, because it's all been on, ChatGPT or the, conversational agents, really means that there's a lack of depth of understanding. And that's not to say, I'm not trying to whitewash the challenges with AI. There's lots of them. But I find that a lot of attention is given to something that was a problem a year ago that we've already solved. That we've already solved for. Um, if you look at even the accuracy, I think people focused on, oh, well, compare what AI will do compared to a physician. And you see, it give an example of lung cancer and radiology. It's only 85% accurate. Well, what's the accuracy of physicians, right? It's an average. And now accuracy can be at 95% levels when you look at generative AI models.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if every model that's out there is at a 95% level, why are we still talking about accuracy? We need to be talking about other challenges with AI so that we correct for them or that we govern for them with human in the loop as part of it, right? If we have human in the loop as part of our processes, as part of our workflows with AI, does it really matter that there are challenges or errors within the system? Every technology we have out in the world has some kind of error to it, and you need humans to check it. As well, humans make a lot more errors
Yeah, they sure do.
than some technologies. Look at, the research around medication error, right? People given the wrong medication. And that can happen at a pharmacy level. It can happen in a hospital. It can happen in many different ways, right? People given the wrong medication and take it because it was, they think it's the right thing. They don't know better. Medication error is a big thing. Well, those are humans usually that are making that error. Sometimes it's a computer because, the person that wrote it into the computer put what was on the slip, but there was one letter off or whatever, so it has it pulls up a different med that sounds like it, whatever. So there's lots of problems already in healthcare. People, say surgery, the big problem that happens where the wrong leg is operated on because they forgot to write on it with, like, should we really have to write on someone's leg, arm, limb with a Sharpie marker so that people don't make a mistake? But that's a process improvement that's put in place in major hospitals, is they literally have to write, an X or some kind of mark with a Sharpie on someone's actual leg because someone can't read a friggin' chart. Are you kidding me? But that's the type of human error we're talking about that happens
Yeah.
all the time. Now, does it happen in a very small number of cases? Of course, 1%, less than 1%, half a percent. But some of the biggest problems that AI is working on now, sepsis prediction, for example, are a use case because it's very hard and challenging for humans to do this in timely fashion. And it's not because humans make errors, which we do, but it's because the systems themselves, the healthcare system and ER is busy and there's lots of things going on and there's lots of problems that could happen. And, if every ER in the world or country had 10 times the personnel, maybe we wouldn't have so many errors, but we don't have that, right? And we don't have it for a reason. We don't have it for a reason because there's a shortage of lots of healthcare providers. And so AI can help us if we do it in responsible ways. And if we have human in the loop as part of the required workflow integration, wherever AI is inserted into a workflow, there's a human in the loop process for review and double checking. That's an optimal system. And I think some people think, well, if you have human in the loop, that means it's failed because this should be automated. I'm like, no, not at all. It's saying that the generative AI tool is truly something that's augmenting human capabilities and is helping humans do a better job by focusing on what we do the best and is allowing it to do what it can do to assist that.
So you touched on so many different points, but we are running up on time, so I'm going to do one follow up. You mentioned that hallucinations are just simply errors, and that when people just like say blanket statement hallucinations, um, they don't really understand that it's misunderstanding what LLMs do because LLMs predict word context. When you mentioned that, my mind went immediately to like parallel universes where and stick with me, where like in another universe we did something slightly different and it went into like a different path. So these LLMs, to me,
Yeah.
it's like there's so many different ways that it could have gone, and it's just choosing what it actually thought, where you
Yes.
thought about like where you were potentially heading with this. So I was just thinking about
Yes.
one of those potential
Yes.
parallel universes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because here's another paradox, I suppose, is I think I see a lot of people writing about, oh, AI is going to kill human creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what is a hallucination? A hallucination is actually creativity, right? It's
Right.
taking something that is what that is maybe not true, but um, reframing it in a different context, a different universe, a different um, framework than what we as humans understand.
I love
Um, so again, that's why I don't like the word, because I think it's not really a hallucination. It's a specific type of error or types of errors that we're really seeing here, and that can be corrected for in many ways. But um, it is create it is the LLM being creative. So it's kind of ironic, right, that we criticize, and that's why I think the majority of criticisms that are just being parroted about
that.
AI are just people that are hyping themselves,
Mm-hmm.
um, and don't know what they're talking about. Yes, some of it's true, but they're literally just at the surface. They're
Yeah.
surface level understanding about what they're talking about. If you go below the surface, there's a lot of nuance here, a lot of things that have been improved upon the models themselves. There's ways around it. There's ways to adjust for it, correct for it, and people aren't really talking about. They're still talking about the things that are last year's story. And contrasting, you have people like Sam Altman. Probably shouldn't throw a name out there, but I can't stand him. Um, but literally, they're literally just hyping stuff. Like they literally are just hype, 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 hype. And again,
Yeah.
it's surface level. It's not in the depth of the discussions that truly need to happen. And the hype that like he's doing is just trying to push past the conversation that really needs to happen. If people don't accept AI, don't want to use AI, and don't trust AI, you don't get past that by just pushing the envelope for the conversation to a future state, right? That actually makes it worse.
Yeah.
That's why I focus so much on governance first, responsible AI, because I think that's where we're at. That's what we need to do. It's not going to be AI is not going to be useful for us. AI will turn and be used against us or become bad in the future if we do not do the work we need to do today on at the governance level, and ensuring that we have ethical and responsible frameworks around how we utilize AI in the work we do. And with the healthcare, I think it should be obvious to people. In other workflows, it may be less obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but even thinking of financial tech, I wouldn't want a mortgage decision being made for my mortgage application based upon someone else's information, erroneously being pulled in. Another Brian M. Green. I have a very common name, right? And in fact, that happens in processes. With my last mortgage, right? I had to
Oh my
go through this stack of documents before closing and say, that's not me, 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 because a computer just compiled documents, and you had to work with the credit bureaus to like get this off my record, get this off my record.
Yeah.
That's a pain. But and hopefully AI's improved upon that, because that was years ago when I bought my house. Um, but this is a similar type of thing where it's like it made me have to do a lot more work that I shouldn't have to do, um, and that's not an improvement, right? So it's very similar. Technology can be used to improve our lives or make it harder.
Mm-hmm.
Generative AI, we can make our lives better by focusing on governance first.
I completely agree with everything that you've just stated. And honestly, thank you just so much for your time and your thoughts on this. It's These are important conversations to have. And I also like how you mentioned that some people just talk about the stuff to hype themselves up without necessarily understanding. And I think that's why it's so important to do your own research and to try to dig in. Like, I feel like with all in the information age that we're in, it's all just surface level, and very little do
Yes.
people actually like take a topic up there and be like, I'm going to dive into that. They just like stick with what that thin line that's being dispersed out there. But it's so important for us to, one, go deeper in, understand the frameworks, come up with our own decisions, our own opinions, and try to figure out like where AI can be used and if it can be used, because it's not for everyone necessarily. And as we mentioned before, it's like, think about cybersecurity, think about data quality, but governance is definitely one thing that needs to be established across every single tech company or every single company that's trying to be data driven, because a lot of companies are not right now. So you've like given us so many points to like think about. So thank you so much for your time, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Sure. No, I enjoyed it so much, and great talking to you since we met at Philly Tech Week,
Woo,
um,
represent.
which was great. I'm glad we were able to continue this conversation, and have your listeners part of this conversation. I'm always ready to talk about AI governance and ethical issues within healthcare.